Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. And here we have Krav the Unredeemed and Regna the Redeemer, a black-white aristocrats deck. This deck comes to us from Ben, who says, once I get the Krav Regna engine going, I can draw a lot of cards, but I need a better way to actually close out and win the game. And they have no restrictions for deck building restrictions. Thank you for the deck, Ben. I love black-white aristocrats, so I've been in the mood for it, so this is a great time for me to be looking at a deck like this. And I will say, for what it's worth, Ben, you sent me another deck of Nicole Bolas the Ravager, of a discard deck, but when I click that link, it is now a Nekusar discard deck, which is why I struck it from my list, because it changed. If you'd like to send me the Nekusar deck, you should do so in a new one, but for those people who send me decks, you know, if you change the deck from what it was once you send it to me, I probably won't do it because, you know, any notes that you've had no longer really apply. So I don't know which direction to work on the deck. But with that in mind, if you'd like to send me a deck, you can look into the video description below to see a link that you can fill out a form and send me your commander deck so I can take a look at it and improve it. Also, if you'd like your deck to be the next deck I look at on the channel, there is a link for that you can use to bring your deck to the front of the queue. And finally, I'm doing this in opposite order. If you look in the video description, you will see the deck list we're currently looking at today. This is, I really do like the deck. It's a very good start for a deck like this, and I think it's a really nice start to black-white aristocrats. So, you know, take a look. If you see anything I haven't thought of, you know, put some comments down below, because it always helps us all work together to build the best version of the deck to help Ben. All right, let's get started. Who are our partners? Krav the Unredeemed and Regna the Redeemer. And why are they the commanders of our black-white aristocrats deck? Now, I haven't made the thumbnail for it, but I'm probably going to use this picture, both because it already has both of our partners in the picture, but I think it also, you know, is the card that is the more powerful of the two. Nothing against Regna, but Krav is an incredibly strong card. Krav is a 5-mana black demon, 3/3. It partners with Regna, and he has, for 1 black, you can sacrifice X creatures to get this effect. And its target player draws X cards, gains X life, and then you put X +1/+1 counters on Krav the Unredeemed. What does this mean? Well, this is a really, really good sacrifice outlet and somewhat of a payoff for having a bunch of sacrifice fodder. Having like 3 1/1s means this is 1 black, draw 3 cards, gain 3 life, give Krav 3 +1/+1 counters. Honestly, that's really, really good. And there might be scenarios where you can still use this with 1 or 2 sacrifice creatures, and you're still pretty happy for it. I think considering that this is 1 black mana, draw X cards, the ceiling on this card is really, really high. I've used Krav in the kind of background of other aristocrats decks, and when he comes out, he performs really, really well. As long as you have 6 mana, 5 for him and 1 to activate his ability immediately, you're usually going to be very far ahead in that game. The fact that he grows is just kind of free, because you're probably not attacking with him anyways, because he's kind of too vulnerable to like combat because he has no abilities, and frankly his power is just too good that you don't really like want to risk him dying. But worst case scenario, for 1 black, he can sacrifice himself as well to draw you that extra card that you need. In a lot of ways, he's a bit like Bantu the Glorified. Let me find that so that we can look at it. Where we have this big 5-mana card that you put into play, you sacrifice a bunch of permanents or creatures in terms of Krav, and then you get ahead on that many cards. These are actually really, really similar. I wonder if this card should be run in as another version of Krav. Don't think it is. Interesting. I'm giving a second thought to this card because Krav is a card that I really, really like. Obviously, Krav is a little stronger because you can use his ability repeatedly over several turns and gain more fodder to sacrifice. Whereas Bantu, she only triggers on ETB. Yet still, I really like Krav. I think this ability is really slept on and really strong. So it's making me kind of think about how much I should like God Eternal Bantu, because I mean she does after all do nearly the same thing. Cool. All right, I'm gonna keep that in mind. Let's also look at Regna the Redeemer, who is unfortunately kind of the weaker of the two, and mainly here to add her white mana. So she is, for 6 mana, a 4/4 flying angel. And at the beginning of each end step, if your team gained life this turn, which for most games that means if you gain life this turn, you get 2 1/1 white creature tokens. So what makes this kind of cool is that if you have both of them out, you can pay 1 black, eat a creature, draw a card, gain a life. Put a counter on Krav. Then at the end of that turn, Regna will see the life gain and put 2 1/1s into play. Then on the next player's turn, you'll eat those 1/1s, draw 2 cards, etc., etc., and then she'll put 2 more 1/1s into play. So if you have the mana, Regna represents with Krav a really good across the circle. You're probably going to draw 6 to 8 cards. Now I don't think that's necessarily true because Regna is a lot of mana. She's not very impressive by herself, and her ability is just kind of mid. Her ability is pretty close to Ophiomancer, which we are playing here, where you're just creating a creature on each upkeep for Krav to eat. Granted, she does create 2, so it's neither here nor there. I think you cast her if you are ahead, you have nothing else to do with the mana, and you just want to keep drawing cards and keep building a presence. Or you cast her maybe in neutral, but you don't cast her when you're behind. This isn't a card that you're going to throw there unless you desperately need a block. She's also very vulnerable to removal, unlike Krav, who could at least sacrifice himself. But, I mean, in theory, if you have him out, you can sacrifice her and at least get some value that way, even though flavor-wise, it's a little upsetting for that to happen. So, when it comes to aristocrats, definitely Krav is the stronger of the two, but if you get both out, Regna is no slouch either. So let's look at the deck itself. And the deck has a pretty strong base to it, but there's a few cards here that a few choices, I should say, that make me kind of unsure. And one of the other things is that the power level of the deck is, I'm going to say, when we talk about non-CDH decks, it's mid to high of an average commander deck. We have cards like Necropotence, we have Esper Sentinel, we have Profane Tutor, Idyllic Tutor, but we don't, and with Diabolic Intent, though we don't have any 1-mana tutors. They'd be here, actually, I should check. No. And we have Smothering Tithe, so we have strong cards in this deck that we want to take advantage of. So we're going to keep the power level kind of consistent. And basically, once again, the statement was that once the combo is assembled and Krav is out, that they aren't they're struggling to win the game from that point on. Now, I find that to be a little surprising personally. I wonder if there's just a lot of hate to stop that from happening, because you should be drawing so many cards and you have so many relevant cards to affect things, but we're going to put in some closing conditions and a little bit of redundancy into the deck. But before we go to my additions, let's look at the curve and let's look at cards I'd like removed. We can see the curve is mainly between 2 and 3, and it kind of trails off real fast. This isn't bad. It does make me kind of question the number of 3 drops in a deck like this, and we might be a little picky on a few of them, especially in this section. But otherwise, it's pretty much a good curve, and I don't mind it so much. Let's take a look at some of the cards that stick out to me. We're going to go backwards from the bottom. Actually, if we go backwards, we should start with lands. 33 lands is heartbreaking. That's a very, very low amount of lands. I do get the idea behind it, because from what you've said, you were feeling like you don't draw into anything, and so you've been cutting lands, but 33 is way, way too low. I'm pretty sure Moxfield, let's go down here and let's click one of our commanders, Krav. It says, let's see, you have a 37.34 chance of playing these on curve. That's too low. That's really, really bad. That means just under like, I gotta do 4 in 10, so 2 in 5 games, you're able to cast your commander on curve, or any of your 5 drops. That's really bad. We need to up the number of lands. I'd like to at least go to 36, 37, and I'm gonna tell you where I would like those cuts to be. We're gonna jump to artifacts to talk about that. Our artifact collection is a little strange to me. So Soul Ring, Wayfarer's Bauble, those make sense. Arcane Signet makes sense. Orzhov Signet makes sense. We're missing, notably, Talisman of Hierarchy, which I think would be a really nice addition here. We're also missing Felwar Stone, which is another addition that I'd like, as they are 2 mana, mana rocks, and I think they're good. Moonsilver Key, I believe, fetches for Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar, so I get why that's there, so I'm not going to be picky on it. But Swiftfoot Boots is a bit of a strange inclusion. Our commanders don't need haste. In fact, almost nothing in our deck actually needs haste. The Hexproof is nice, but I'd rather Lightning Greaves if that's the case. But even then, it doesn't really feel like the thing we need. Like, if our permanents get targeted, we can just sacrifice them. Yes, that's not as... because you have to think, you might say, but Cursed, Hexproof is better than just killing off your own creature. Yeah, but if they're responding to the equip, you're losing your creature anyways. So you're down to the sacrifice plan either way. So it's not that different. So I'd probably want to cut the boots entirely. Blasting Station, I'd also like to cut. I get why it's here, but it's a lot of work, and 1 damage per. I guess you could ping down creatures, but I don't particularly like this as a sack outlet. You only get to sacrifice 1 creature until you play another one or you have upkeep. And that's actually a really big drawback. You're going to want to be able to sacrifice many, many creatures in a row, because that's kind of your win condition half the time. And when you think about it in the sense of this, think about if you have, several of your aristocrats out, not the aristocrats, the Blood Artist effects out. So let's say you have Blood Artist, and let's just say you have 1 opponent. You have Blood Artist, you have Elisil Core, and you have Zulaport Cutthroat. So every time one of your creatures dies, your opponent takes 3 damage. Then Blasting Station represents an additional 1 damage every time you do this. And if you can't do it multiple times in 1 turn, that 1 damage is really holding you back. Whereas if you have Ashnod's Altar and you're sacrificing 2 to 3 creatures, right? That extra damage per Blasting Station activation really, really doesn't matter. Blasting Station activation. What a phrase. So with that in mind, I would toss the Blasting Station. It feels like a weaker sacrifice outlet when in a deck full of really, really good ones. Chromatic Lantern, likewise, you're a 2-color deck. You don't need the effect of getting any color. This should be a 2-mana rock or a land, so I would cut this. Orzhov Locket as well, absolutely would cut this. It should just be a land. You're just going to have more success that way. Pristine Talisman gives me some pause because there is a bit of a life gain thing going on, but I don't think it's worth it this way. I see in the sideboard you're playing you were thinking of playing Soul Warden and Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant. The Soul Sisters, I should say. And those are just better than Pristine Talisman because they represent so much more life gain and so much more regular life gain. This is just taps once a turn, whereas the Soul Sisters can gain you life over multiple turns in a turn cycle, triggering Regna a lot easier. But honestly, I would play none of them because I think you just have better ways to trigger these effects. Looking through enchantments, I'm generally pretty happy with all of these. I think Martyr's Bond kind of sticks out. I have a replacement in the side that's 1 mana less, and we'll get there. But in the meantime, it's just you're not really sacrificing non-creature permanents all that much. And I think, yes, non-creature. I was going to say non-land, but that's what the card does. So you're not really sacrificing non-creature permanents. So it's not really giving you anything about losing enchantments or artifacts. I guess you have some artifacts, but I don't think this is worthwhile. Maybe in some corner cases with treasure tokens, you're going to get a lot of triggers. But even then, I don't know to what degree this is just going to be better than Grave Pact. So I'm a little suspicious of this, but I don't think it's that much of a problem. Looking at our instants, we have an interesting collection of them because I feel like this is like Teferi's Protection is really, really strong and the rest are kind of just okay. So I feel like this is a section that you can improve your deck quite a bit. Mortify is just too much mana for what it does. And if you really want this effect, I always say this, but you should be playing Generous Gift because it'll hit anything. It gives them a 3/3, but you don't particularly care about that. And it doesn't require black mana. You'll be a lot happier with that effect. Withering Boon is cute, but I don't think this is the kind of deck that's going to hold up mana. So I don't think the counterspell is exactly where you want to be. And it only counters creatures, which is a very narrow thing in Commander. Yes, it can counter any commander, but there's probably better ways to do that, which I would suggest, actually, because I haven't gotten to talk about this card. I don't think, let's say 1 mana, white, Curse. Curse of Silence. If you wanted to use, if you're using Withering Boon to just hate one commander, like you're holding it up to stop a commander, just play Curse of Silence instead. You play it, you name a commander, and then you forget about it. Basically, you're giving free commander tax, and when they cast that commander, you can cycle the curse or leave it on so that the next time they have basically double commander tax, even though they're just being cast for the second time. All right. Disenchant feels a little weird. You already are playing Fracture and Despark, and then with Generous Gift, I don't think you need Disenchant. You can probably toss that. Tragic Slip should really just be Swords to Plowshares. You'll just be a lot happier with that change. Likewise, Dismember and Cut Down both feel kind of weak in the Commander format. Black just doesn't have the same kind of removal that the other colors have. And if you're willing to play Dismember, I would just say to play Infernal Grasp, because it just destroys any creature, and you don't have to worry about if -5/-5 is going to be good enough. Force of Despair is interesting. I'll leave this up to you. I think sometimes it can be really good, and other times it's just going to be useless. So I leave that to you to decide how good it is. I do find Force spells are a lot better in multiplayer formats, because there's more turns you can cast it for free. But even then, I don't know. It's dependent on your play group. Certain decks will fold to this, and other decks will just not really care. So you'll have to figure it out yourself. Looking at our sorceries, Emergency Weld feels particularly weak. I think you'd just rather a reanimation spell, but we'll get to that in additions. Legions to Ashes. This seems really specific as well. It's just like another Anguished Unmaking / Vindicate, and I don't think you need this many versions of this effect because Generous Gift is already just really powerful. But if you're playing against a lot of commanders that are like really big on tokens, I think you just rather a board clear is what I'm thinking, but I'll leave that to you. It is really cool art though. Vindicate is the last one. If you have this art of Vindicate, I can never be mad. This is such sick art. That being said, I do find Vindicate is like your second Generous Gift, and since we don't have access to Beast Within in green, I am willing to kind of say that, yeah, it's worth playing. Just like Generous Gift, blowing up people's lands is not nothing. It can both knock a player out of the game, but it can also like deal with very troublesome permanents, like Field of the Dead. So it is worth considering. So I think it's definitely playable here, but you have to note it is clunky versus all of your other removal. All right, looking at our creature collection. I definitely have some adjustments here. There's a few that I think are a little, they stand out. Razaketh doesn't feel like it belongs here. Razaketh is really, really cool, but is more for an all-in combo deck. Now, I'm going to give you a combo once we get to my additions, but until then, Razaketh really does feel, I don't know, it feels like it's just too much mana for the deck to get to, and you don't have a reliable reanimation strategy, so it feels like a lot of work. Like, this is arguably the best single card in your deck, and then what are you going to tutor for, right? Because you've already gotten the best card of your deck. So I don't really love Razaketh here. I think Razaketh's really good, but maybe in a different build. So I would cut them. Darien, kind of strange. I wish you had a way, like, if you had, like, Goblin Bombardment or something, I think that would be really, really cool, but you don't have the access to that, so instead, you're dependent on your opponents to kind of deal the damage for you, because paying life doesn't work, and with that in mind, I don't really like him. This is a card I see every now and then on people's lists, and like if you're playing in a very aggressive meta and you can like force attacks, Darien can be really, really strong. But in a deck like this, you have Darien out and you have, Blood Artist out, just no one's gonna attack you, right? Before destroying Darien, which isn't difficult to do. They'll just Blasphemous Act and then attack you, or just remove like Swords to Plowshares Darien. So I don't really love him, and he's a lot of mana for the effect, so I would like to cut him. Crested Sunmare is definitely a kind of life gain payoff. And I'm looking at it as they create a 5/5 every turn. And I wonder to what degree that Ophiomancer is just better, because when you're ahead, you just want sacrifice outlets. And don't get me wrong, 3 5/5s you untap with, or 4 potentially, is really, really good. But your deck isn't really an aggro deck, so it's not really that these 5/5s won't be supported in a meaningful way. You're just kind of creating 5/5s that aren't doing anything, and it is neat that Crested Sunmare stops a board clear against them, but it's just one removal away. If you have Crested Sunmare and you have like 3 horses that are 5/5s, and I have a board clear, I'm just going to look around the table and be like, hey, can anyone remove Crested Sunmare, and then I'll wipe the board. And I would like to believe it's highly likely someone's going to take me up on that offer. I will also say, no, it's completely just deleted itself from my mind. There it is. Toxic Deluge is another common board clear that just gets around this. That was the thought, sorry. And you can bounce the tokens, so I don't particularly like Crested Sunmare. I think like in a more aggressive combat shell, I could see it here, but here it just doesn't feel particularly good. It's a lot of mana. It's the same mana as your commander, and you're never casting the Sunmare over your commander. The rest look pretty good. Considering we have Lurrus, I feel like we need more low mana cards, because when you think about it, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 7, plus another 7, plus, what is that, 5? So that's 19. We only have 19 permanents that you can cast from your graveyard with Lurrus. I feel like that's a bit low. I feel like I wouldn't mind that. I think I wouldn't mind if you went up in numbers. Like, don't get me wrong, Lurrus is really, really good, but I think you need a few more 1 and 2 drops, which I am going to give you some, and then Lurrus goes from being a good card to great in a deck like this. Let's see, Suture Priest feels a bit weak here. It just doesn't have the effect that you want. You want people to lose life. You want a Blood Artist effect. You don't want people to lose life as they play creatures. However, I will say, if one of your play group is really, really big on tokens, you're going to be really happy playing Suture Priest. And if that's the case, I say leave it in for sure. Finally, Oathsworn Vampire feels really, really strange. You just have a lot of better options. Like, think about this card versus Reassembling Skeleton, right? They do the same thing, right? This terrible, has it been a common? It has to have been a common. Oh, Wow, it's always been an uncommon. Okay, this fantastic uncommon that finds its way into so many different decks. Reassembling Skeleton is just better than Oathsworn Vampire, right? Because you still have to cast the vampire, which means you still have to cast it during your main phase, whereas Reassembling Skeleton is an activated ability and you can do it at any time. And the trade-off is that the vampire has 1 extra power and toughness, which you don't really care about because you generally just want to sacrifice it anyways. So I would do that swap. All right, so let's talk about my additions. Now, first thing, some of these are for people that we know, that know me and what I like in Aristocrat decks. The first 2 cards are pretty straightforward, and they are Carrion Feeder and Viscera Seer. I got it right. Viscera Seer and Carrion Feeder. Why? Because they both have a sacrificed ability that costs nothing, and they are 1 mana creatures. These are some of the most important creatures of the deck. And in fact, I should note another one that's worth playing, which is Ranger Captain of Eos. And the main reason you play it, which is the main reason I play it, is to grab one of these 2. That's how good they are. They're so good, I am playing a pretty good card, mind you, of Ranger Captain, just so I can tutor for these 2 cards. If you want Knight Captain of Eos or Knight Ranger of Eos, the other ones that go and get 1 mana cards will work as well, but I personally have a soft spot for Ranger Captain because I used to play him in Modern. However, back to Carrion Feeder and Viscera Seer, they're just so strong. They represent the same kind of power that Phyrexian Altar or Ashnod's Altar does, where they just represent all the sacrifices you can do at any speed, but they have the very, very real benefit of being creatures. A lot of times in Magic, we talk about things being creatures as kind of a downside because they get to be removed, especially in Commander, where we have board clears a lot. But here, we're very happy to see them as creatures. Why? Well, first of all, as a permanent that's under 2 mana, especially a creature, we can reanimate them with Lurrus, but we can also just reanimate them in a bunch of different ways, right? We don't have much here right now, but we might add a few cards that allow us to do that. And that means that these cards that are already really good value engines can be used as combo pieces out from the graveyard out into the battlefield, which is really, really good. Speaking of reanimation, let me introduce you to the combo that I think this deck should be running to close the game. And that combo is Karmic Guide and Revelark. So, how does this combo work? Well, Karmic Guide says when she enters the battlefield, she will reanimate a creature, any creature that you have, onto the battlefield. And Revelark says when the Revelark leaves the battlefield, you reanimate 2 creatures that are power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So with a sack outlet and these 2 creatures, they will infinitely revive each other just forever. As long as no one interferes and you have your graveyard, these 2 creatures will revive each other and you will always have a sack. So what do we add to this? Well, first we need the sack outlet. So let's go back and look at, let's say, Carrion Feeder. Carrion Feeder is a fantastic sack outlet. And then what we need is 1 Blood Artist. Ideally, we can use something like Zulaport Cutthroat that hits all of your opponents all at once. And so if we have Revelark, Karmic Guide, a sack outlet, and Zulaport Cutthroat, we've immediately won the game because we can just keep sacrificing the Elemental and the Angel over and over again, draining our opponents 1 for 1 damage every single time. Now, you might have noticed the genius of this combo is that both Zulaport Cutthroat and Carrion Feeder are creatures themselves, and they are both under 2 power. So when you're doing the cycle of playing Karmic Guide to bring back the Revelark, and then you sacrifice the Revelark, well, what do you pull back onto the battlefield but the Blood Artist? Or you can just cast out Revelark naturally and wait for it to be removed, and then when it dies, you get the Carrion Feeder, right? And so no matter what happens, you will pull out from your graveyard the cards you need to finish the game, which I think is really, really cool. Now, if you just play Revelark, there is a threat of it being exiled. So I tend not to do that unless I'm going to remove it myself with either like a board wipe or targeted removal. And then when I do that, it'll go in the graveyard and start the combo for me, which is really, really good. So that's the combo I'm going to suggest to answer the question of like, how do I finish the game once I get the combo going? These cards are all pretty good in and of themselves. I would argue probably Revelark is the weakest one to just run out there because, you know, the stars kind of have to align for it to work. Oh, I forgot to mention, yeah, of course, this thing has an evoke cost. So if you have the mana, you can just play it to immediately sacrifice itself, and then you'll get the trigger starting the combo right there. So, sorry, I forgot to say that. But Revelark is kind of weaker in the combo. Karmic Guide is definitely playable, is definitely a card I tend to play in white-black cards like this, decks like this, because you're just happy sometimes reanimating a creature and going on with your merry way. And then you don't pay the echo cost. Karmic Guide goes back to the graveyard, and the next time you reanimate something, you can reanimate the Karmic Guide to get, you know, get the card you wanted through the Karmic Guide, for example, or just wait until it's time to Revelark and win the game. So those two cards are, so Karmic Guide is pretty strong by itself, and then the Blood Artist plus the Sacrifice Outlet, well, that's just your deck. So you're pretty happy to just have it on hand, and you're not going to be too sad about it. Now, I will say, if you are missing a Blood Artist, Krav may not be the best way to draw into it, because technically you'll sacrifice both these two creatures, right? Karmic Guide comes into play, Revelark leaves play, and by the time that Revelark is in the graveyard, its trigger is on the stack, so you can use Krav to sacrifice both of them to draw two cards and put them back into play. I don't know if that works. I think Krav isn't, because you'll never actually draw the cards with how the combo works. So Krav, unfortunately, isn't a great thing to get the combo going, but he'll be really good to draw you into the combo. All right, the next thing I want to suggest about closing games is a non-infinite combo, but it's just a few more Blood Artist style effects. Cruel Celebrant, you're in white-black. This is the card to play as your like Zulaport Cutthroat Blood Artist effect. That's just really, really good. Now it says a creature or planeswalker. We basically ignore that text and just have it say creature, and what it'll do is that it'll just function as every time a creature dies, you will gain a life and your opponents all lose one. Once again, at 2 mana, this creature can be brought back with Lurrus, which is really, really nice. Then we have the non-creature variation that I also like playing, which is Bastion of Remembrance. Bastion comes with a 1/1 and then just has the same text as all of the other ones that you have. You're generally going to be happy with it. You can kind of just preemptively throw this out sometimes because it is a card that doesn't tend to go away easily because they need to target it with specific removal as opposed to like a board clear. So it is a bit more resilient, but you can't get it back with Lurrus. So a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Then the card I wanted to replace Martyr's Bond with would be Dictate of Erebos. Now this is about $12 American, so it's not free, but it is just another version of our Grave Pact ability where whenever our creatures die, each opponent sacrifices a creature, which is just game ending. If you can have this out on the battlefield and then sacrifice 2 creatures, generally that'll put you far enough ahead that even if it's immediately, interacted with, you're going to be very, very happy. And of course, its ability that it has flash makes it even stronger in this way, and so you're almost guaranteed to get the effect off and get very, very far ahead. The final thing I kind of wanted to add that I felt that these colors were missing is reanimation effects. So I'm going to say reanimate, I'm going to say animate dead, I'm going to say persist, and I'm going to say victimize. And I'm going to have one more in a second, but I'm just going to quickly talk about these. These are just simple reanimation spells that you're going to be very happy with. Animate Dead might be the best because you can cast it from the graveyard with Lurrus, but all of them you're just going to be pretty happy to get back, any of your creatures. Honestly, you'd be happy just getting back a Zulaport Cutthroat sometimes because it just represents so much damage over time that you're pretty happy just casting one of your spells to do so. And Victimize, of course, is particularly strong because it represents 2 creatures and you're sacrificing a creature, which is something your deck wants to do already. Now there's one more card I want to talk about, and I'm going to see if I can figure it out because I don't remember its name. It's white, it's 2 mana. Opponent, return, graveyard. Let's see if we can find it. Jailbreak. Okay, Jailbreak. I do this every now and then where you know, I think it's funny that sometimes content creators will tell you about this card that's breaking, you know, it's so good, nobody thinks about it. And I don't get to do that a lot, so here's mine for like this month. Jailbreak is a really, really, really good card. Jailbreak says that you basically reanimate a permanent from your opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield, and then when it enters the battlefield, you return a permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield that is equal or lesser mana than the one you reanimated for your opponent. That's a lot of text. What does that mean? That means in exchange of giving one of your opponents a card back onto the battlefield, you too get a card back. So let's think of it this way. What is the floor of this card? The floor is that if you play fetch lands and your opponents play fetch lands, this is a 2 mana ramp 2 players. And when you're not in green, that's absolutely playable. In white-black or mono-white, I'm very, very happy to ramp one opponent and ramp yourself at the same time. There's an argument that this is even better, that if you pick your opponent with the most lands, and then you can keep playing Knight of the White Orchard effects, like cards that allow us to keep grabbing lands out of our battlefield as long as we are not the one with the highest amount. And you don't even need to pick the one with the highest amount. You can pick the player that's just before you. If, you know, the top player has 5, the second player has 4, and you are at 3 because you haven't played a land, you can pick the player with 4 lands, ramp both of you, and then play a land and be caught up with the, maybe you do have to pick the player with the most lands, but it is interesting. It does give you ramp in white in exchange for giving it to one other player, and I think honestly that's really, really good, and I do like that. That's the floor. What's the ceiling? Oh man, this card wins games because you just find the player. This is a 2 mana reanimate spell where you just need to find an opponent with a card that costs more mana than the thing you want to reanimate. And that's honestly really easy. Depending on your power level, it like the thing is this kind of auto corrects, because if you're a lower power level and you need to reanimate like a high mana card to get ahead, your opponents will have high mana cards in the graveyards because they're playing medium to low power decks. So they'll have like what is it? The Death Titan, Grave Titan. You know, Grave Titan will be in the graveyard for 6 mana, and you're perfectly fine giving them that Grave Titan back because it lets you get back like Smothering Tithe or Necropotence, or like, I guess those are higher power cards. So let me think of something. Like it lets you get back, what do you call it? Grave Pact, which will completely negate the Grave Titan. So you'll be really, really happy with that exchange, right? And at higher power level, yeah, you're just going to get Karmic Guide. You're going to get your combo and win out, like immediately win the game, which is, I've done that a lot of times with Jailbreak. And finally, with that in mind, you know, at that high level where you're giving people back like 3 to 4 mana cards, that's all you need for Necropotence. I would cast Jailbreak to give someone back like a 1 mana card, like a elf or something, to get back my Esper Sentinel. At a high level, like play group, that's a really, really good play, and you'll be really happy to make it. So, all that to say, I really, really like Jailbreak. You don't have to play it. I just want to gush about it, and though I do think it does belong in the deck, and you might get a lot of success with it that way. All right, to sum up my points, I've been trying to do this more where I will end the video by telling you what I think the deck, just all my ideas all together. My ideas are this. 1, you need more lands. 33 lands is a little too low for a deck like this. 2, there's a few cuts you can do, mainly in mana rocks and high mana creatures, and some of your removal can be kind of cleaned up to be more mana efficient, but otherwise the deck itself is really strong. 3, I think if you added in the Blood Artist effects that you're missing and the like 1-mana sacrifice creatures of Viscera Seer and Carrion Feeder, your deck will be a lot smoother and you'll be a lot happier with the kind of sacrifice grind that you're putting on. And finally, 4, I think you should go and try the combo of Karmic Guide and Revelark because it will win you games instantly in a deck like this. Those are my points. I hope this deck assist was helpful to you. I really love these commanders. I especially really love Krav, so it's nice to see him again because he is such a strong card. And I'm sure there's like other builds where what you can do if you like Krav but you don't want to go kind of in this kind of more aggressive, stronger deck and you want to build a lower power deck. I think Krav can be built as a Voltron commander really easily. He's just really strong and fun to play. If you have another draft of this deck that you'd like me to take a look at, there will be a link in the video down below. And after that, if you'd like that deck to be the next one I look at, there's a link that you can use to bring your deck to the front of the queue. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, do the whole YouTube thing, I'd be very grateful. It helps the channel. And every little bit helps get the channel going. We've just passed 200 subscribers. It's a lot of fun, and I hope we keep going to at least 225. We'll see. Let's get there, and then I'll decide the next thing to do. Oh, I will say, this is the last thing I'll say, and I doubt anyone's gotten to this point of the video, but I will say that I am writing out a script for a more dedicated look at like a primer for the concept of aristocrats and commander, because honestly it is my favorite strategy and I think it's one that would really benefit from a primer to help people build it in all the flavors it can be. If you're interested in hearing that or seeing that, let me know, but I am kind of working on the side either way. All right, thank you very much for the deck and good luck.